Hi, I'm Jacob Gallucci, and today I'd like to talk about the Super Bowl. And yesterday I made a list of the five best Super Bowls that I've ever seen, plus one honorable mention. And today I'd like to announce what I think are the five worst Super Bowls I've ever seen. And there's an honorable mention too. And all these games were either boring or blowouts, and they just most they were all bad games. And anyway, here they are. The honorable mention is Super Bowl 30, which was the first Super Bowl I saw. It was between the Cowboys and the Steelers, and the Cowboys won that game 27-17, and it was a relatively close game, but Neil O'Donnell threw those two interceptions to Larry Brown, and I still think O'Donnell was paid to blow that game. I really do. And it's a shame because the game was tight. The game was close the whole way, and then O'Donnell's interceptions really they cost the Steelers the game. And number five, for the fifth worst Super Bowl I've ever seen was Super Bowl 33. It was the Broncos and the Falcons, and the Broncos won that game 34 to 19, and it was actually John Elway's last game, but the Broncos destroyed him that day. They were winning that game at one point, 31-6, and the Falcons were never in that game. They never had a chance. Even if the Vikings had made it that year, the Vikings deserved to be there. I think more than the Falcons. Even if the Vikings had made it, I still think they would have lost to Denver. Absolutely. Denver was really good, and they were going to win. You knew they were going to because it was Elway's last game, and they wanted him to go out a winner. It was a boring game, too. The Falcons were just really overmatched. Number four for me is Super Bowl 41. It was between the Colts and the Bears, and the Colts won that game 29-17. It was a sloppy game, really sloppy. The game was in Miami, and it was raining throughout the game. It was bad. It was a boring game, and there were 8 turnovers in that game. 8. The Colts had 3 turnovers, and the Bears had 5, and it's unfortunate that I'm a Bears fan, and that's the only Super Bowl I've seen the Bears play in my lifetime. It was just a really disappointing game. I think Rex Grossman and Cedric Benson cost us that game. They both played poorly, and it's a shame because I'm convinced that if you put Jay Cutler in that game, I think we would have won. I really do. He's a lot better than Grossman. And it was just a sloppy game, and I'm hoping the Bears will be in the Super Bowl in the next couple years or so. And today's the 27th anniversary of when they won Super Bowl 20. I hope it doesn't get to 30. I really don't. I hope the Bears can win another Super Bowl in the next year or two. I'm sorry. I'm hoping that the Bears could win a Super Bowl in the next year or two. It's been so long. I really want to see them win one. And number 3 is Super Bowl 40. The Steelers won that game 21-10 over the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks got screwed in that game. Absolutely screwed. They outplayed the Steelers. They really did. Matt Hasselbeck had a better day. Matt Hasselbeck played better than Ben Roethlisberger that day, and the Seahawks got robbed. There were a couple bad calls. There were touchdowns that were called back, and they got screwed, the Seahawks. They really did. It was just embarrassing. Number 2 for me is Super Bowl 37. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers beat the Oakland Raiders that day, 48-21. It was just a really sloppy game. It was an absolute blowout. John Gruden had coached the Raiders before that, and he had coached most of the Raiders players, including quarterback Rich Gannon and Tim Brown and all of them. And Gruden knew all the plays they were running. I mean, it was just a really sloppy game. Rich Gannon threw 5 interceptions in that game. 5 interceptions. It's still a Super Bowl. It's still a Super Bowl record. And let's see. 3 of those interceptions were returned for touchdowns. 3 of them. Yes, that's mind-boggling. The Raiders they played so poorly that day. It was such a boring game too. I stopped watching after in the second half. I barely watched the second half. The game was basically over by then anyway. And the worst Super Bowl I've ever seen, no question about this, is Super Bowl 35. The Ravens won that game over the Giants, 34-7. The Giants were so overmatched that day, it wasn't even funny. The Giants' only touchdown was on a kickoff return. The Giants didn't score a single offensive touchdown in that game. No passing touchdown or rushing touchdown. They played so poorly that day. Kerry Collins had 4 interceptions in that game. He only completed 15 out of 39 passes. That's really bad. Awful. And it was just a very sloppy game, and the Giants had no chance. The Ravens absolutely dominated them in that game. That game was just so boring, and it was just... I barely watched the second half. It was just frustrating. But I'm hoping this year's Super Bowl is a lot more interesting. It should be. The Ravens and 49ers should be an exciting game. I'm looking forward to it, and I'll talk about that game in more detail next Friday. And like I said yesterday, in a nutshell, I think the 49ers will win. And anyway, I'm sorry for rambling about the Super Bowls here, but I'll be back on Monday with 2 new videos, and until then, take care.